Bapak Ibu sekalian dan kawan-kawan yang semoga senantiasa mendapat rahmat dari Allah di siang hari ini yang agak sepoi-sepoi dan ngantuk tidak? Rasanya sepoi-sepoi. Berita udah enak sekali nih ngopi gue ya.
Ada bantal nih nanti.
Do I have to speak in English or no? No?
Yes. No one.
I don't have to, right?
No, I don't.
I don't have to.
I don't have to.
Jadi di sini saya berbicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. Tadi suaminya
Yang di situ deh.
Nanti kalau yang bule datang balik ngomong.
Di switch.
sekarang saya bahasa Indonesia dulu ya. Ini ada pentingnya karena sebelum saya melanjutkan kajian Syama'il Muhammadiyah yang saya sampaikan dan lalu di rumahnya Bu Rita. Hari ini itu tanggal berapa?
14.
Bukan.
Tanggal
masih
Oktober.
ada.
28 Oktober.
28 Oktober. 28 Oktober itu di Indonesia adalah hari nasional. Sumpah Pemuda. Iya, betul tidak? Kalau pengajian kurang lebih 2 tahun yang lalu, itu saya masih awal-awal di sini ketika Ustadz Rafiq, ketika Oktober itu temanya pada merah putih. Ini sekarang warna-warni.
Amin.
Mungkin pengurus
Hitam
pengajiannya
putih.
nggak apa.
Atau batik.
Kemudian jadi alasan mengapa saya mau pakai bahasa Indonesia dulu, sebab konsep mengenai Indonesia itu tidak dimulai pada tahun 1945 ketika Indonesia itu merdeka, tetapi dimulai pada 1928 Sumpah Pemuda, ketika pertama kali para pemuda itu bersatu di Jakarta, berkumpul Jong Java. Bacanya Jong atau Yong? Yong Java, Yong Betawi, Yong Sunda, Yong Minahasa, Ambon, Maluku, Celebes, terusnya. Mohon maaf kalau ada yang kelewatan. Bersatu untuk meneguhkan diri, bertumpah darah satu tanah air Indonesia, berbangsa satu bangsa Indonesia, dan berbahasa satu, bahasa persatuan, bahasa Indonesia. Ini saya tidak bermaksud untuk mengeksklusi yang non-Indonesia, mohon maaf Pak Jamal dan semacam. Tapi harapannya ini ada beberapa pelajaran yang bisa ditarik secara universal. Bisa ditarik secara universal. Pertama adalah, saya 3 poin saja dari pelajaran dari Sumpah Pemuda ini sebelum saya masuk ke nanti melanjutkan Syama'il Muhammadiyah ya. Pertama adalah, ada begitu banyak suku-suku di Indonesia. Indonesia itu yang bikin dia unik pertama apa? Satu, terdiri dari 17.000 pulau. The most archipelagic country in the world is Indonesia. Tidak berapa, betul tidak? 17.000 pulau kan?
Nomor 2.
Nomor 2, nomor 1 apa?
Swedia.
Oh, Swedia. Salah, saya keliru berarti. 17.000 pulau, more than 100 tribes, hundreds of tribes, ratusan suku, ratusan bahasa daerah. Mereka berkumpul di Jakarta pada 28 Oktober 28. Tetapi sekalipun yang dominan, suku yang dominan di Indonesia itu suku Jawa, betul tidak?
Betul.
Suku Jawa itu 40%, suku Jawa, 15% suku Sunda. Selebihnya dibagi-bagi less than 5%, kurang dari 5% dibagi-bagi Minang, Aceh, apalagi Borneo, Dayak, Banjar, Melayu juga ada di Riau, Celebes, Ambon dan seterusnya. Tapi kemudian yang dipilih itu adalah bahasa Indonesia, bukan bahasa Jawa. Ya tidak, yang dipilih sebagai bahasa persatuan itu bahasa Indonesia, itu yang diambil akarnya dari bahasa Melayu Riau. Diambil Raja Ali Haji itu yang pertama kali, ada Gurindam Raja Ali Haji, mungkin yang ingat, di Melayu juga terkenal
Di SD itu.
Gurindam 12 Raja Ali Haji itu beliau yang pertama kali membuat gramatika bahasa Indonesia. Nah, itu diambil menjadi bahasa persatuan. Nah, kalau ditanya mengapa kok tidak memakai bahasa yang dominan, punya negara terbentuk, dia akan mengambil dari bahasa yang dominan. Tapi ini tidak diambil dari bahasa yang dominan, tapi mengambil bahasa Melayu. Kira-kira apa alasannya? Ustadz Iqbal ini linguistik ya? Apa? Mengapa kok tidak bahasa Jawa? Tapi yang dipilih mengapa bahasa Melayu?
Akar
Lagi senang aja? Ada beragam alasannya, dalam analisis sejarah itu ada beragam alasannya. Alasannya antara lain ya pertama karena bahasa Melayu pada waktu itu sudah menjadi lingua franca. Lingua franca itu bahasa yang dipakai untuk perdagangan ekonomi antar kerajaan-kerajaan, terutama yang paling ramai pada waktu itu adalah di Selat Malaka. Alasan yang lainnya, kalau pakai bahasa Jawa itu kan bahasa yang hierarkis. Ada bahasa Jawa rendah, bahasa middle, low, middle, high. Kalau bahasa Jawanya ngoko, kromo, inggil. Ya kan? Kalau mau bicara antara sebaya, mau mengatakan Anda itu ada berapa kalau Jawa itu? Siro, ente bukan ya? Apa sih? Kowe, sampean, panjenengan, itu ada begitu. Kalau bahasa Indonesia itu apa? Kamu, Anda itu yang lebih. Nah, dibanding bahasa Jawa, bahasa Melayu itu dipandang relatif lebih egaliter. Kan tidak ada. Kalau mungkin klasik ada Melayu klasik, Melayu low Malay, and then middle Malay, high Malay, klasik tapi yang modern, baik bahasa Melayu modern maupun bahasa Indonesia modern itu relatif lebih tidak hierarkis, relatif lebih egaliter. Itu yang kedua. Yang ketiga, alasannya adalah alasan yang lebih ideologis. Para pendiri bangsa kita tidak ingin menciptakan negara di mana suku yang dominan mendominasi dunia perpolitik. Sampai sekarang sebenarnya Jawa itu masih dominan. Halo. Saya lanjut ya. Sampai sekarang itu Jawa masih lumayan dominan. Ini dibuktikan dengan dunia perpolitikan di Indonesia sampai saat ini. Kalau mau maju jadi capres atau cawapres, itu pasti selalu mengambil orang either Jawa Tengah atau Jawa Timur, betul tidak? Kalau istilah perpolitikan di Indonesia itu Jawa adalah kunci. Artinya orang kalau mau maju dan dia ingin mendapatkan suara yang banyak, harus ada orang Jawanya. Di tiga calon presiden Indonesia yang mau, ya ini sekaligus penyeimbang dari berita-berita yang suram di tanah air, berita politik yang makin suram. Ini kita bisa bersyukur dengan Sumpah Pemuda itu. Di antara yang unik dari Indonesia itu negaranya dibangun dengan, kalau istilah akademisnya ya, nasionalisme yang inklusif. Nasionalisme yang tidak ingin suku yang dominan mendominasi semuanya. Jawa sudah dominan, maka bahasa yang kita ambil adalah bahasa Melayu, bahasa Malaysia. Itu juga alasannya mengapa Indonesia selain dia memilih bahasa yang bukan bahasa dari yang suku dominan, juga tidak menjadikan Islam sebagai agama negara. Biasanya Pak Ican itu pakai kaos merah putih gitu, harga mati itu. Nah, itu alasannya itu sebenarnya bukan kok kemudian tidak Islami. Justru ketika ini tidak menjadikannya sebagai negara Islam, itu bisa menginklusi semuanya. Jadi Soekarno dulu ketika pertama kali mencetuskan Pancasila itu, beliau menyatakan dalam pidatonya, kita ingin bikin negara bukan untuk orang Jawa, bukan untuk orang Islam semata, tapi kita bikin negara dari semua buat semua. Itu istilahnya. Kita bikin negara dari semua buat semua. Dan biasanya para ulama dulu kemudian menisbatkannya dengan kisah ketika Nabi Muhammad datang pertama kali di Madinah. Beliau bikin perjanjian dengan orang-orang Yahudi. Beliau menyatakan di sini kan ada namanya Piagam Madinah, Konstitusi Madinah. Beliau tidak menjadikan Islam sebagai undang-undang dasar kalau sudah ada undang-undang pada waktu itu, tapi menjalin kesepakatan dengan orang Yahudi. Dikatakan hadza kitabu Muhammadin bainal muslimin wal yahud. Ini adalah perjanjian antara Muhammad mewakili orang-orang yang beriman dan muslim bersama dengan orang-orang Yahudi, sepanjang mereka satu tujuan. Wa man jahada ma'ahum fa innahum ummatun wahidah. Sepanjang satu tujuan, dan ketika ada musuh menyerang, baik Muslim maupun Yahudi meskipun berbeda agama sama-sama membela Madinah. Pada dasarnya mereka adalah satu umat saja, ummatan wahidah. Jadi umat itu tidak terbatas hanya pada satu agama, tapi juga beragam agama, beragam suku, beragam bahasa. Kalau mereka bersatu satu tujuan, maka itu satu umat saja, satu umat saja. Ini hal yang mengapa saya tadi sebut ini sebagai hal yang patut kita syukuri. Indonesia itu beragam suku, pulau-pulau terpencar bisa bersatu dalam satu negara, satu bahasa, satu bendera. Now if we compare that with Arab countries, for example, Arab countries, you have one language, satu bahasa kurang lebih, ya ada variasi dialek-dialeknya, tapi terpisah-pisah ke dalam banyak negara. Betul tidak?
Betul.
Saya ulang lagi, jadi Indonesia itu ratusan suku, ratusan bahasa lokal. Like 90% of Indonesians speak bilingually, their local language and their national language, and yet they can unite into one nation under one flag. But in Arab countries, they speak one language, and yet they're divided into how many countries? 20 countries. I mean, the members of the Arab League are 20 countries, and many of them are fighting each other. Antara Suriah dengan Qatar itu tidak selaras. Antara yang sekarang terjadi di Palestina, di Gaza itu, setelah dibombardir sama Israel itu, kan banyak sekali pengungsi dari Gaza. Mereka pengen pergi ke pengungsi dari perang di Middle East itu, baik Palestina maupun juga Suriah. Kalau mereka mengungsi kemana? Ke Europe malah, rata-rata ke Europe. Rata-rata justru ke Europe, bukan ke negara tetangganya yang satu berbahasa sama,
Paling gampang
dua kurang lebih agamanya mayoritas juga sama-sama Muslim.
Betul.
Kan kita sering mendengar ukhuwah Islamiyah, persaudaraan sesama Islam. Dan antara sama Muslim itu bagikan saudara, ya sudu ba'dhum ba'dh, kata Nabi. Satu sama lain saling memperkuat karena sama saudara Muslim. Tapi mereka mengungsinya ke Europe karena sebagiannya itu terakhir itu dari Mesir, dari Presiden Mesir sama Presiden Yordania nggak mau lagi menerima pengungsi Gaza. Alasannya di publik itu mengatakan nanti kalau mereka pada mengungsi di sini, Israel seneng dong penduduk di Gaza tidak lagi banyak, akhirnya Israel makin mendapat wilayahnya. Alasan lainnya, kami sudah punya perjanjian damai dengan Israel. Kalau mereka kami tampung, berarti kami juga ikut bikin masalah dengan Israel. Nanti kami juga akan berperang dengan Israel. Artinya apa? Tidak mau terlibat perang dengan Israel. Nabi kan mengatakan man kana yu'minu billah falyukrim dhaifahu falyukrim jarahu. Kalau kalian beriman kepada Allah dan Rasulnya, maka muliakanlah tamumu satu, kedua tetanggamu. Your neighbors first. Nah itu pertanyaan besar, bagaimana bisa, kenapa? Itu kan Israel satu kecil aja. Israel itu paling berapa besar, mungkin sekitar DIY itu. Sebesar daerah istimewa Jogja itu. Dikepung oleh begitu banyak negara-negara Arab. Artinya kalau mau mereka bersatu,
langsung bisa.
Perang gitu, semoga ya tidak perang korbannya akan banyak sekali. Tapi seumpama diandaikan itu perang, kebut satu, itu kurang lebih akan equal karena di belakang Israel ada Amerika. Teman di sini, dan setiap mau ada veto di United Nations itu selalu diblok sama di US. Nah ini satu hal yang selayaknya kita patut bersyukur di Indonesia itu. Mayoritas Muslim sedunia itu bukan lagi di Arab, tapi ada di mana? Di Indonesia dan South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh ya. Orang Islam yang berbahasa Arab itu 20% saja. Orang Islam yang berbahasa Arab itu 20% saja. Selebihnya itu mayoritas di Asia Tenggara, Southeast Asia and South Asia. Itu diantara, dan di Al-Quran itu dikatakan dalam surah Quraisy ya, li'ila fi Quraisy ila fihim rihlatash shita'i was-shayf falyabudu rabb hadzal baitil ladzi at'amahum min ju'in wa amanahum min khauf. Itu artinya adalah orang Quraisy, ingat-ingat nikmat yang kalian miliki, nikmat bisa berdagang. Kalau musim panas itu ke utara ke Syria, kalau musim dingin ke selatan ke Yaman, maka sembahlah Tuhan pemilik rumah ini yang telah at'amahum min ju' wa amanahum min khauf. Ini dua nikmat paling dasar bagi bangsa apapun. At'amahum min ju', yang memberi makan kalian sehingga bebas dari rasa lapar, wa amanahum min khauf, dan merasa aman. Kalau mau di simplifikasi baseline bagi suatu negara untuk bisa bersyukur atas negaranya adalah apa? Bisa punya food security, makan itu terjamin. Sekarang itu kan banyak negara yang paceklik, yang famine, dan sebagian dari negara-negara yang kekurangan pangan itu negara-negara mayoritas muslim seperti Somalia, Yaman, Sudan, bagian dari Nigeria. These are countries with a large number of Muslims. They have, they are suffering from famine, and but we're not. And the other one is wa amanahu min khauf, secure. Jadi bisa aman, bisa beribadah dengan aman. Nah, sekarang juga banyak many Muslim countries who are suffering from war. Di Syria, Palestina, Yaman juga masih. Nah, karena itu Sumpah Pemuda bisa menjadi momen kita untuk bisa bersyukur dengan negara NKRI di Indonesia. Terakhir dari soal muda ya, itu adalah pertanyaan besar adalah mengapa pemuda zaman dulu, mengapa pemuda zaman dulu itu bukan hanya strong emosi, bukan hanya strong pikirannya, mereka kan banyak sekali pemikir-pemikir, tapi juga strong mentally. Saya pernah cerita waktu itu di mana lupa, beberapa kali saya sampaikan juga pemuda zaman dulu itu masih muda tapi sudah jadi pemimpin. Kalau di zaman Nabi ada Usama bin Zaid itu usia 17 sudah menjadi jenderal perang. Orang-orang zaman dulu itu mungkin karena dididik dalam lingkungan yang keras sehingga dewasanya lebih cepat. Tidak seperti orang zaman sekarang. Yaitu ironi dari perubahan zaman ya. Zaman yang keras itu melahirkan orang-orang yang kuat. Zaman yang muda melahirkan orang-orang yang cenderung lemah. Usama bin Zaid jadi jenderal perang itu usia 18. Orang-orang dulu nikah juga muda-muda, anaknya banyak-banyak karena nikahnya muda. Ibu saya itu bersaudara 7 orang. Itu biasa di kampung biasa karena mereka menikah pada muda-muda, tidak harus menunggu S1, tidak harus menunggu PNS dulu. Itu sudah pada berani nikah. Dulu orang lulus S1 itu mewah, belakangan lulus S1 biasa. Dulu orang lulus S1 cari kerja lumayan mudah karena belum oversupply. Sekarang kalau di Amerika apalagi, zaman saya S1, S2, S3 yang PhD banyak yang unemployed, itu tidak apa. Yang PhD itu banyak yang unemployed. Ya, artinya semakin orang dimudahkan, kompetisinya juga semakin ketat. Orang menikah sekarang itu makin belakangan, anaknya dikit. Zaman dulu menikah muda-muda, orang zaman dulu itu balik kalau dalam ikhlas itu balik, itu langsung orang tuanya punya kewajiban untuk menikahkan anak-anaknya. Balik itu patokannya zaman dulu kalau perempuan 9 tahun, kalau laki-laki 15 tahun.
Udah mens
9 tahun. Ya, orang-orang zaman dulu kan life expectancy-nya juga rendah. Mereka sudah hidup sampai 60-an tahun. Mereka hidup 45 kalau rata-rata ya. Artinya orang sudah pikir usia 30 sudah tua pandangnya. Karena 40-50 sudah pada meninggal. Jadi begitu. Nah, pemuda-pemuda zaman dulu itu masih muda-muda tapi sudah jadi pemimpin bangsa. Itu yang ikut Sumpah Pemuda. Itu rata-rata usianya 20-an. Soekarno itu baru usia 28, dia mendirikan Partai Nasional Indonesia. Wahid Hasyim, bapaknya Gus Dur, itu jadi Menteri Agama usia 27-28. Usia 27 dari jadi Menteri Agama. Dan Jenderal Sudirman, dia memimpin PETA juga usia 30-an. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah mengapa pemuda-pemuda zaman dulu itu strong mentally, strong physically, dan sekarang tidak. Dulu zaman awal-awal ketika muncul media sosial, ada Twitter, ada Facebook, itu kan biasanya orang nyebar meme. Nyebar meme itu kalau Sumpah Pemuda, di antara meme yang disebarkan itu apa? mengutip pidatonya Presiden Soekarno, beri aku 10 pemuda akan kuguncang dunia.
Iya.
Sakitnya apa? Beri aku 10 pemuda akan kubikin boyband. Itu kan zaman awal-awal kita dulu. Zaman awal kita dulu terus kemudian ada boyband di Indonesia smash gitu. Lagunya kenapa sih kecilan jadi ketika ada kamu. Terus pakaiannya pinggir-pinggir gitu. Boyband. Nah, itu menjadi pertanyaan besar. Bagaimana bisa kita mencetak pemuda yang semacam itu? Saya juga tidak punya jawabannya. Kadang-kadang hal-hal yang memanjakan itu membuat orang itu jadi terlena. Orang-orang angkatan atas saya itu masih menyaksikan bagaimana mereka mendemo pemerintah tahun 98 ya. Mulai kesini aktivis mahasiswa mulai berkurang.
Iya.
Karena sibuk berjoget di TikTok mungkin. TikTok maksudnya.
Banyak yang begitu.
Jadi mentalitas untuk pikirannya tajam, berani mengkritik pemerintah, itu belakangan makin kesini makin.
Makin melempem.
Anyway, itu refleksi dari Sumpah Pemuda yang bisa kita ambil pelajarannya. Dan selanjutnya ya saya tidak eksklusif untuk orang Indonesia karena di sini ada juga yang orang Indonesia. Now do I have to speak in English or?
Yes, because Brian is there.
Oh iya, Brian is there.
And then
Oh, is Brian there?
I don't know.
Oh, di sebelah sana.
What's your name, brother?
Rahim?
Rohim.
So then, three brothers. So you do have to speak English.
Really?
A little bit.
Little bit, okay.
Little deh ya.
A lot is okay.
Yeah, we'll try. I won't be able to speak all the time in English, because that's really hard sometimes. And need to think twice to find some words. But I will try to speak in English now. Perhaps I would speak in some in Indonesian, but the main points would be in English. So to continue what I talked about in the last gathering in Burika's house, I was talking about some details of the life of Prophet Muhammad SAW, and I talked about the difference between Sirah on one hand and Shama'il on the other hand. Sirah is big episodes, big events that happen during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad SAW. So events like the birth of Prophet Muhammad, and then his coming of age, and then his first time of receiving revelation, and then when he migrated, and then his journey to Al-Aqsa, to Jerusalem, and then his migration, and then his wars, Badr War, the Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of Khandaq, etc. These big events, these big episodes are usually explained in Sirah. Okay, Sirah is biography of Prophet Muhammad based on big events. But we also have some snapshots of the life of Prophet Muhammad SAW based on everyday life, based on his everyday life, such as his appearance, his way of eating, his way of sleeping, his way of many things, like the details, small details that he did. So many things about Prophet Muhammad SAW, for example, was modest, decent. He's not really tall. He's not really small. He is not black. He's not super white. I mean, Arab. Usually, the Arabs at the time would call the whites not the Europeans, but rather the Caucasians. When they call the white people, they're not the Arabs but the Caucasians. And he was of middle stature. He has mukanya itu tidak bundar, tidak lonjong, sedang-sedang saja. Lehernya tidak begitu panjang. His chest is just like everyone else's chest, but his stomach will never exceed his chest. Perutnya tidak pernah
That's very good to know. Very good to know.
very slim. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to imply that
That you have to do it
he would
like
have.
six.
That has something to do with his diet actually.
Oh, okay.
Because I talked last time that Prophet Muhammad never ever eat 3 times in a day. He only ate twice. Actually, there was a hadith that reported Aisha. You know, when the Muslim civilizations have already expanded to conquer Persia and parts of Rome and many parts of northern Africa, and then Muslim civilization have become rich. They got a lot of sometimes oversupply of food, and many early Sahabas, they have high position in the government. They have a lot of foods, and then when Aisha was given foods, she ate while crying because she always remembers during the day of Prophet Muhammad SAW, he never ate bread or meal twice a day while being full in his stomach. Tidak pernah kenyang. Ya. Makan 2 hari sekali. Sometimes he would only eat, and this as Aisha recalled, his wife recalled, that made a few months in our house, and we don't see smoke at all. Because we only ate dates and drink water, sometimes honey, and no meats were cooked in our house for a few months. So remember the hard time at that time. Aisha was crying when she was given some food. Ya, jadi perutnya rata.
Terima kasih.
So if you want to follow the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, not only follow his way of dressing, his clothes, etc. Sometimes people use robes, big robes, to follow sunnah Nabi, yet he has big stomach. Jadi tidak mengikuti, tidak
Following.
itu that beliau whenever he speaks, so the way he speaks, the way he sleeps, he would usually speak slowly. Then he is often described as bulbul mantik, very eloquent and speaks slowly. He would emphasize certain words to make sure that the people he is speaking with would be able to understand his words easily. Whenever he speaks to someone, he would not turn his head, but rather he had his head and his body full, giving full attention. So I talked last month that Prophet Muhammad, when he was speaking with someone, he had a ring, and that ring came from Abyssinia, and he really liked that ring. But sometimes when he is speaking with his companion, he would get distracted with that ring. And then what he did, he took off the ring, he threw it away, because that is a distraction. And I talked about this last month, that sometimes, especially today, we are easily distracted with our phones, right? With our phones, and when someone is speaking, yet you're playing with phones. When someone's speaking and yet you're playing with phones, that indicates that, I don't want to really pay attention to what you're saying. What you're saying is pretty boring, perhaps.
Yeah, something like that.
Another thing is that his way of sleeping. He usually would sleep shortly after Isha, and then he would wake up around 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and then to do tahajjud, and then he would sleep for a short time before subuh, and then he would sleep again later on, shortly before duhur qailulah, or what we call here nap. So that's his way of sleeping. And in the books of Shama'il, it is also mentioned amongst his appearance that he had less than 20 uban, gray hair. Because when I was speaking English, I have to think of the words.
White hair. It's okay.
So gray hairs. And usually ulama, the classical scholars would di kitab Syama'il itu diceritakan bahwa Nabi Muhammad itu punya uban tidak lebih dari 20. All his hair and his beard Yeah, it's less than 20, and usually classical Muslim scholars would interpret that this indicates that he almost never get angry and stressed.
Yeah.
In other words, if you want to grow your gray hairs, one of the tips to grow gray hairs is be stressful, get angry. Be stressful, get angry. Now that doesn't mean that people who have gray hairs then they're easily triggered or that they're depressed. Now that's a leap of logic, you know. If people are often get angry and stressful, then he would develop gray hair quite easily. But that doesn't mean that if someone has a lot of gray hair, he's stressed or he's easily triggered. It could be genetical. It could be genetics. Yeah. Sometimes we can see young people who are in their 30s already develop their gray hair. But that indicates that he was not easily triggered. He almost never angry. He is called in the book of Shama'il as Basam, people who often smile. It's not only that he is smiling, but his face is already smiling. Basam. His face is already smiling. There are only three occasions. When Rasulullah SAW was upset, was getting quite angry. One event was that when one companion named Usama bin Zaid. So Usama bin Zaid was the son of Zaid bin Haritha, and Zaid bin Haritha is who? I mean, the relation between Zaid and Nabi. Anyone remembers? His stepson. Remember? So Prophet Muhammad has stepson named Zaid. So Zaid has a son named Usama bin Zaid. So it is like his step grandson. Yeah, step grandson.
Yeah.
So as I said earlier, Usama bin Zaid at the age of 16, he was already the leader of Muslim army. They went to war. And when Usama bin Zaid face to face with his enemy, and his enemy was almost defeated, but before Usama bin Zaid slay his sword, his enemy say, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah." I bear witness that there is no God of Allah except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. But yet still, Usama killed him. Later on, one companion then came to the Prophet Muhammad SAW asking about that event. Your step-grandson has killed someone who has just recited Shahada, recited the testimony of Islam. And then Rasulullah got really angry. Why, Usama, did you do that? And Usama said, he recited Shahada just to avoid the killing. He wants to be regarded as Muslim, but I know that he was not sincere with that testimony. But still, the Prophet was really upset about that. Did you really see what is happening inside his heart?
Yes.
And you really open his heart until you kill him. Later on, this then in fiqh will be the basis, the dalil, the prohibition not to do takfir of our fellow Muslim brothers. As long as they are reciting Shahada, they still have the Shahada, then we will regard him as Muslims. What is inside their heart, it's not our business. It is his business with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. But as long as he still has the Shahada, then we treat him as Muslim brothers. So that's one thing. Another event when Prophet Muhammad was quite angry was when a companion called another companion as Ibn Sauda, meaning what? He is the son of a black woman. So a companion calling another companion, a son of a black woman, Ibn Sauda. And then Prophet Muhammad was upset with that. He was really upset with that, and he said, even you don't remember your parents. Your parents were Jahiliyah people. They were still worshipping idols. So you don't have the right to insult the other people. And in fact, most people who came to Islam early, beside the elite Sahaba, the elite companions, they were of black people, they were former slaves, like Bilal bin Rabah. So that was the second time when Prophet Muhammad was really upset. The other one, the last one, is when Aisha, the wife of Prophet Muhammad, get really jealous with him because Prophet Muhammad SAW often mentions his first wife, Khadijah. Every time he remembered his first wife, Khadijah. And then Aisha got really jealous, and she said, why you still often mention her while Allah has replaced her with someone who is more beautiful, meaning herself. Why you still remember that? And this is what she said. Why you still remember that old toothless woman? That's what she said. Hamra asyidki, perempuan yang sudah tua dan tidak lagi bergigi. Itu Aisyah mengatakan begitu. Itu kan kalau ceritanya dalam sirah itu sampai banting piring. Karena saking seringnya Nabi Muhammad itu menyebut Khadijah. So that was the angriest moment. That was the angriest moment of Prophet Muhammad SAW. In the hadith it was described that his veins were visible because he got really upset with that statement, and then he replied, no one would replace Khadijah because he supported me when everyone else said that I was a liar. When everyone else in Mecca said that I was a liar, she was the only one who supported me, gave me comfort, and no less important than all, she gave me children. So that was a blow to Aisha, and after that she asked for forgiveness and never mentioned at all Khadijah after that incident. So that was only the 3 times when Prophet Muhammad SAW got angry. In any other cases, he never got angry. Jadi marahnya itu hanya itu saja. Kalaupun beliau marah, itu semata-mata karena Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Nah, itu marah itu kalau if we think about anger, ya, sometimes people get angry for some small stuff. But if you want to reflect a bit, do ta'awud and then reflect a bit, actually anger doesn't solve anything, doesn't solve any problem. Sometimes instead of solving problems, anger creates new problems. Yeah, there are many reasons why people get angry. Some people, when they're treated unfairly, they would get angry. But Prophet Muhammad would ask us, if you ever get angry, take a step back, do ta'awud. If you're angry while standing, sit. If you're angry while sitting on the floor. If you are still angry, do wudu. That is a moment to reflect before you get angry, so you can choose whether if we are angry, then that would really solve the problems or create new ones. And this also talks about that the health is not about physical health, but sometimes also about mental health. One story that is cited in classical Islamic books is that there is this physician. This physician, he came to a village to cure someone, because that village was plagued with diseases that are difficult to cure. And then a few months have gone by, and that patient still keep coming, but during the last visit, he was getting well. And then the physician said to the patient, so thank God now the medicines have worked, you're getting well. But the patient said, no, it's not because of your medicine. It's not because of your medicine, it's because of the Hakim. Hakim means wise man. The wise man at the corner of the town who just came, and he gave me, he did ruqyah, and he did prayers for me. Really? Is that what he did? No, that is not really scientific. The physician said, that's not really scientific. Let me come to him. And then the physician came to the Hakim. He said, I heard that you cured people with your prayers. I've never written in any journal articles that prayers can really cure people. Now you are doing malpractice, malpraktek kedokteran. What is it in English? You are doing malpractice. And then the Hakim, the wise man, said, you know what? You're a donkey. He said that. What did you say? How dare you? How dare you talking to me? How dare you say that I'm a donkey? Well, you don't look yourself. I'm a Harvard graduate, and you're just Arizona graduate. No, this is my edition, you know. Beraninya kamu menghina saya ini lulusan Harvard, Ivy League, and you are Arizona graduate. And then the wise man said, look at you. I don't give you anything. I don't give you medicine, physical things. No, I just say a few words, and I can determine what is going on inside you. I can control you with my words. You get the point here?
Yeah.
You get the point here. Banyak orang, when we are easily triggered, actually at the same time we put ourselves under someone else's control. Kalau mudah ke trigger, itu berarti tanda jiwa yang lemah sebenarnya. Karena itu berarti kita mudah sekali dikendalikan oleh perkataan orang lain. I only give you few words and I can already determine, I can control what is going on inside your soul. I don't give you medicine. I don't need journal articles to justify what I'm doing here. Yeah. So that's we can say sometimes like Islamic way of dealing with stress, dealing with anger. Because many times people today when they're dealing with anger, when they want to focus, where do they go? Where do they go usually? They would got inspiration from Buddhist meditation. They got inspiration from yoga. They got inspiration from maybe some secular philosophies like Stoicism. But we Muslims, we actually have some inspiration from our own classical tradition, from Prophet Muhammad SAW. Now that it's already the time for Hondur, I still have time to talk about other things if you want. But speaking English is really tiring.
Should I translate?
And so
Drink first.
I want to drink first. And if you have questions, you can ask now. If you have questions about some details about Prophet Muhammad SAW,